the OPO, Observing Program Office. So Fernando Patat and Dimitri Gadotti to start to share their slides. Good morning, Fernando.
Good morning.
And yes, so their presentation is about how to write a successful proposal. Trust them. I listened to it and I want some proposal. Thank you very much, Fernando.
Thank you very much, Carlo Felice. Good morning to everybody. Welcome to this workshop. I hope it's going to be useful for everybody. So my name is Nando Patat, and together with Dimitri Gadotti, who is going to share the presentation with me, I will present you what I believe are useful tips for preparing successful proposals. Of course, if we had a 100% certain recipe for this, we would probably not be here today. However, there are certainly some guidelines that it is always useful to follow. Before we go into the details, and those will be presented by Dimitri, he will specifically talk about the tips and tricks for the proposal preparation. I will try to give you a general overview on the proposal review process, which we believe is a useful piece of information so that you put yourself in the correct mindset. When you prepare your proposal, you know how this is going to be reviewed. And so you try to put yourself in the shoes of the reviewers who are going to be faced with a large number of proposals, as usual at ISO. So, as you know, we call for proposals 2 times a year. And there are 2 seasons in which we do that. It's typically September and for the observations in April to September next year, and then in March for the observations from October to March in the next year, of course. Then we call them periods, so I will use this expression throughout the presentation, and the next useful period for proposal submission is period 108. So we just released the call for proposals. The deadline is on the 25th of March, so you have still some time to prepare it. And this is for observations that will take between October the 1st, 21 and March 31st, 2022, just to be clear for the newcomers. In the presentation, we will always refer to this phase as to phase 1, as opposed to phase 2, which is what follows when your time has been awarded to your proposal. As you probably know, and if you don't, you're going to learn it now, you can apply basically for 2 observing modes, the service modes, or also known as queue mode in other observatories, and visitor mode, which is the classical mode by which an observer would go to the observatory. In addition to that, we also have, and that unfortunately we are forced to use as the only option we have in period 107, 108, what we call the designated visitor mode, which means that you're going to be allocated on specific dates on the calendar. So you're not going to choose those dates. And typically this is the case because your observations are time critical, and you will be in remote connection from home or from your institute with the observatory. Now, also some jargon. The responsible of the proposal is indicated as the principal investigator, or the PI. I will refer to it as the PI, who's the person who submits the proposal, possibly with a number of co-investigators, which we indicate as co-Is. I state it again, in the eyes of ISO, the only responsible for the proposal is the PI, who takes the full responsibility for the content of the proposal, and also for having agreed with the co-Is that are on board. I'll get back to that afterwards. In terms of statistics and time that goes to given countries, what counts is the PI affiliation. So it doesn't matter, it doesn't really matter what the composition of the team is. We count the time for the country to which the principal investigator is affiliated. A proposal is considered a non-member state proposal if more than 2/3 of the co-Is are not affiliated to an ISO member state. I'm stating this is explicitly spelled out in the call for proposals, just for the sake of completeness. As a matter of fact, there is nothing in the process of the review that discriminates between member states and non-member states, meaning there are no quotas in the ISO system. So if you are affiliated to Thailand, which is not a member state, you have the same probabilities of getting the time and the same chances of getting the time as a PI coming from Spain, which is a member state. It is only when everything else being the same and two proposals competing exactly for the same resources that preference will be given to the member state proposal. In my experience, and this is now 10 years I'm running this show, I've never seen such an occurrence which is there just to cover all possibilities. Once you are awarded the time, and this refers to visitor mode, which unfortunately will not apply to Bureau 108, ISO will cover all expenses, so you will be taken care of, and your flight will be organized, your stay on the mountain will be fully organized, you will not spend a single penny. However, there are no extra fundings, which is the case at other telescopes, for instance, for providing you support for data reduction in terms of money, I mean, or supporting students. So this is exactly the right time to start. So Dimitri has released the call for proposals on the 25th of February, so a few days ago. The deadline is March 25th, 12 Central European time, and we are very strict on that. So do not try to submit proposals after the deadline. It will not be possible. I'm stating the obvious, but every semester we get some instances. The starting point, of course, is the call for proposals. I will get back to that, but there are some very useful links. And here I have one. These links are active, so when you get access to this presentation online, you will just be able to click on the links and get to the place. And also there is useful information in this other page just below it, the proposal open page, where you have direct access to the proposal submission tool. Now, I mention it here because we are in a very special condition. Period 107, the call for period 107 was suspended because of the pandemics and all the consequences that this had on our operational workflow, and to offer the possibility of asking for time for very special cases that should take place during period 107, and so to give the ISO community the opportunity of putting into the system some very urgent, important case that cannot be missed. And I state it again, it has to be very exceptional. ISO has opened a special call for period 107. This has been announced several times. You can apply for it starting as of the 1st of April. The submission is continuous, so there is no deadline. Probably the deadline is the end of the semester, I mean, may be anticipated. I state it again, and I will not say it again. Before going to that channel, you have really to scratch hard your head and try to convince people that you really need to have the observations in period 107. If for any reason they can wait for any other semester, you shouldn't submit a proposal. So here there is some interesting reading. If you are interested, I doubt, but in case you are, there's quite some literature that we produced which explains the full system in many, many details. There are analyses on how the process works, whether there are biases in the system, the possibilities of deploying distributed peer review in the future, and so on and so forth. So I always say that if you submit a proposal, well, you are not sure you will get the time. But if you don't submit a proposal, you are 100% sure you will not get the time. So that is, you know, that is a simple statement, but people typically do not think about that. So if you have a good idea and you believe it is strong, just go ahead and do submit a proposal. Of course, writing a proposal is easy, and writing a good proposal is not. So now we'll see in the rest of the presentation, we'll see what we believe a good proposal is based on our experience. The first thing to do, as Marina said, is to read the call for proposals, and this is a must for the first-time users. Of course, you don't need to read it all. There are sections which are relevant for you, but certainly there are parts which you have to read. It contains lots of information. It's important for the first-time users. It contains many useful and dynamical links to instrumentation, for instance. It's a binding document. If your proposal is approved, in fact, it constitutes a contract between you and ISO, and therefore it contains also the policies. And by submitting a proposal, you implicitly accept and sign that you will comply to those policies. Therefore, it is a good habit to read the contract before you sign it. So certainly the sections that you need to read is the phase one instructions, so where you invite the proposals, the generalities, and where we also describe the proposal types, the program types. I will not go through them, which are shown in the next page. And the place which is most important for you at this point is the user portal, which is the access to all ISO services. This is the interface that you get once you enter. So make sure you have an account. If you don't have an account, you will not be able to submit a proposal, to even create a proposal. You go in there and you see that there is a very prominent box called phase one, and it has this label submit an observing proposal. You click that link and you will get in business. So first of all, make sure you have a user portal account. It takes a few minutes. It will ask you for some information, but it's a very useful thing because it will also get you access to the archival data. You will get access to the newsletters and so on and so forth. Make sure the profile, if you have it already, is updated. So you give updated information. This is not just for statistical purposes, but it is also to deal with institutional conflicts during the proposal distribution, for instance, and also for the communications which will go back and forth between you and the observatory. If your email address is wrong, for instance, then yeah, this is a problem. So make sure you have ticked a box which says, I want to submit an observing proposal, SPI, delegated PI or COI, and or be considered for a selection as a proposal referee. This does not mean that by clicking that button you will be selected as a referee. It just gives us a green flag that we one day may call you for serving in our panels. Also, this is important, as of a few periods, we make it mandatory that all co-investigators are registered into the user portal. This was not the case in the past, but now it is. So make sure they are registered, because otherwise you will not be able to add them to your co-investigator list. And if you discover it at the last minute, the only alternative you will have is to leave these people out, which may damage your proposal. Also, by doing this, in the moment that you add them to the proposal, they will get a notification. Therefore, by submitting a proposal with a certain number of people, we ISO assume that those people have agreed because they have been notified about the fact that they were included. If you do it at the last minute and they don't have the time to react, then it is your business afterwards to deal with possible controversies. They are very rare. I just state this for the sake of completeness. So I will not go through the program types. So we are offering a wide range of programs, from the normals, which are the most frequent ones, and the monitoring large programs, and so on. I leave this to you as an exercise to read through the call for proposals. Again, there is a very important part, which is the policies. So if you are a first-time user, you should read it. Who may submit? What are the policies? For data release, for proprietary time, and so on and so forth. Now, there are important links in the call itself. There is a link that points you to what we believe are important links for you, and they point to the home pages of the observatory, technical information, important changes for the specific period, which you may want to see. An instrument may be out of operations, or certain modes may not be offered during the semester, and so on and so forth. So it's good that you at least check them once. Now, to set the stage and to give you an idea of what game we are talking about, this is a short summary. So we receive on average every semester 900 proposals. We have peaks above 1,000, which was the case in 106. These proposals are submitted by 700 distinct PIs for a total of 3,500 COIs from 50 countries. So if you compare it to the IAU membership, you see the scale of the game. Every semester we get a request which exceeds 3,000 nights. And as you can imagine, there are no 3,000 nights in a semester, even counting all our telescopes. So the available science time is of the order of 1,000 nights per semester in total. And a fraction up to 15% goes to the guaranteed time observations. So this is something that ISO does based on contracts. This is the proposal submission history. For your entertainment, you can have a look at it. The bottom line is that we reached more or less saturation of around 900 proposals per semester already as 10 years ago, basically. And also this is the growth of the community. If you look at the green line, this is the number of distinct users that every semester submit a proposal. So you see that now we have stabilized around 3,500 people every semester. So they say that if you know your enemy, you can fight a better battle. And now this is an exaggerated metaphor, of course, but I think it is good for you to know how the process works. So the OPC and the panels are organized in 13 panels for the 4 science categories that we have at ESO, so cosmology, galaxies, ISM and planets, and stellar evolution. There are 6 members per panel, and the OPC is formed by the panel chairs plus some co-chairs to make a balanced vote then in the end when it comes to voting the large programs during the meeting. So this is a total of 79 people which we convene every semester. So these people, you should see them and think about them as your peers, because actually they come exactly from the same community from which you come. So it's not us and them, it is only us. It is the same. At some point you will be also probably called to serve in one of the panels. So you have also to think that, to put yourself in that kind of mindset. What would I do if I had been sent this proposal to review? Now you are not the applicant, you are the reviewer. So you read your proposal and you try to be as critical as possible, which is very hard. Trying to get outside of the proposal and looking at it with more objective eyes. This is typically done better by one of your members who has not written the proposal, because you, as a first author, if you are the PI, you are not objective. There's nothing you can do about that. So it is always good to have the proposal being critically reviewed by your members in the team, who somehow do already a pre-refereeing work. So ESO facilitates the process, but it doesn't take any active part. So we just facilitate it. We don't have any say in this process. And the final allocation is 100% based on the recommendation we get from the OPC and the panels. Of course, we are in charge, together with USD and PSO, so and the Paranal Science Operations and User Support Department, to take into account technical and operational constraints, but that comes only after the ranking is done. So you, as a PI, will receive a feedback from the OPC. The primary referee is responsible for writing. Each proposal is assigned to a primary referee, and this person puts together the results of the discussions. And we also add this ancillary information, which you get in your web letters. We tell you in which quartile you were placed. We give you the oversubscription factor for the specific telescope. We also give you the reasons, if this applies, why your run was not scheduled, although it was highly ranked. Maybe technical constraints or your program may be unfeasible. We give you also the technical feasibility comments, which are prepared by the La Silla Paranal Observatory. And then we also state, I state it now, but we also state it in the notes, that at the time the reviewers wrote the comment that you get, they did not know whether or not your proposal will be successfully scheduled, because those are 2 separated processes. They deliver the ranking and then we prepare the telescope schedule. And during the scheduling, because of other technical and operational constraints, your proposal may not be allocated time, despite of the fact that it was maybe top ranked. Now, what should you expect from the OPC process? Well, I can state it up front that the level of subjectivity of this process, being based off human judgment, is extremely subjective. Now, in this graph, I have collected something like 200,000 grades from 10 years of data that we collected. And you know that each proposal is reviewed in the pre-meeting phase by 6 people, okay? 5 or 6 people, depending on the conflicts. So you can put in a diagram like this, the grade of referee A versus referee B, and you can make all the possible distinct permutations. Now, if the process were 100% unsubjective, then all the grades would lie on that red line. but what you see below is reality. Now, for a purely random process, the green and red shape that you see below the line should be a bivariate Gaussian, and the contour levels would be perfect circles. You see that they are not perfect circles, and this elongation gives you the idea of that this is not a random process. There is a systematic effect, so they tend to agree. The correlation factor is only 0.2, which is rather low, but this is what it is. Therefore, this is just a numerical demonstration of what happens in real life. If you send the same proposal to different bodies, most likely you're going to get different opinions. However, this is a recognized mechanism of peer review, and therefore it's subjective, but that is the criterion we use to allocate the time. Now, the pressure factors are high. I'm not hiding that. They are not as high as at HST, but still, they are always above 3 on average, if I take all proposals for all telescopes, but then they can reach 5, and at certain right ascension ranges, with MUSE, they can exceed 8 and reach 10 at some times. So large programs are harder to get through, so the acceptance rate is 1 out of 5. So we have to be clear on that. And getting target of opportunity time is also hard and must be A rank by construction, so it must be top selected, and of course the topic has to be rather appealing and typically only for ephemeral and transient astrophysics. So this is important. I'm getting close to the end of my part. As of period 107, which also affects then 108, of course, ESO is deploying, in line with other large facilities on the planet, is deploying the dual anonymous peer review process. This means that your identity will not be revealed to the reviewers, so the proposals are anonymous in that respect. The first bit, of course, is easy. We just take away from the proposal the team composition, and that is easy, but of course it's not sufficient because you can disclose your identity in a number of ways in the text itself. Therefore, we have prepared guidelines for this, and period 106 was run as a dry run in which all applicants were kindly and warmly encouraged to use the anonymization rules, and I'm very satisfied to say that 75% or more, that's a lower limit that we have from the reviewers, complied to those rules. It's not easy. It takes time and effort. You cannot just take your old proposal and resubmit as is. You have to go through each single sentence and make sure it is reasonably ambiguous what the identity of the team is. In some cases, it's extremely easy. You always use the third person. You don't say we have, but Patat and others have. So whether it is you or somebody else is going to be reasonably ambiguous for the referee to do. There are more complicated cases, which we are specifying in the guidelines to which I refer you. Now, one important point is that we are all aware that 100% anonymity cannot be reached. There are some obvious cases. However, we reckon that the proposals will have done a good job if it is reasonably ambiguous who submitted the proposal. I make this comparison. It is impossible to reach 100% justice in any society. Nevertheless, we should try to always approach that number, although we know it's impossible. You will find this example on the guidelines. This is an old style proposal in which you see is a fake example based on Galileo's history since 1609. Our group has been accumulating evidence, and so it's clear who that is, because then it says we have discovered at least 4 satellites around Jupiter, and I quote Galileo. So the referee immediately knows that this proposal has been submitted by Galileo and his collaborators. Now, there is a reworked version of this, and then you can go through it on the web. There is the example in which all of this has gone, and it's quoted either in third person or an impersonal way. So evidence has been accumulating since 1609, and then of course you quote Galilei, so the reviewers can look at Galilei, but it is sufficiently ambiguous. This proposal could have been submitted by anybody. Of course, there are more subtle cases, which I will not go through here, and examples are provided on the real examples are provided on the guidelines, and more will be provided as soon as we accumulate more experience. for that. Of course, there are some non-anonymous sections in the proposals in which you have to reveal your identity because this is important. Of course, there is the team composition, the previous uses of the use of facilities, your publications related to the topic, a new section which is called background and expertise, and the team composition in alphabetical order. These sections are not revealed to the reviewers. They are revealed to the reviewers only at the end of the process. And now I leave the floor to Dimitri for the second part.
So Nando, do you want maybe to answer the question one question we got? So who judges if a proposal is reasonably anonymous? What is the penalty if it is not?
Yeah, so this is spelled out in the guidelines, but I can state it here. So we explicitly ask the panel reviewers to check this. And so they don't take decisions, they signal possible violations of the anonymization rules to us, meaning to the Observing Programs Office. We do a first screening, and then if we reckon this is a plain violation, this is then flagged to the Director General. This will not affect the ranking of the proposal, but in the most extreme cases where this is plainly obvious, like I make an example, I say, as I have demonstrated, Patat 2020, this is an obvious violation which, and this answers the last part of the question, will lead to proposal disqualification. So the proposal will be purely rejected, purely based on these violations. This is a plain violation. Other cases, you know, the HST experience shows that they have a 1 per mil occurrence of these cases per cycle. So people are careful enough, they do avoid these extreme cases. I believe that since we are at the start of the process, we will try to be lenient at the beginning with the ambiguous cases, because as the word says, there's always going to be some subjectivity in that judgment. But I believe that we'll use a lenient eye. We certainly don't want to punish the users, we want to educate them. And therefore, maybe during the first semester, you will get the feedback that will tell you, yeah, this is borderline, you should do this rather than that.
All right, so I should take over now. So this is going to be a collection of thoughts and remarks about what we think are good proposals. Of course, there is no infallible recipe to write a successful proposal. This is basically what we have collected at OPPO by seeing the OPC work, by seeing the discussions between the panelists at the OPC. And one may say that many of these remarks that I'm going to make here now are common sense, but in the rush of writing proposals, we see that astronomers often forget common sense. So we think that these comments here, these remarks, will be useful for you to keep in mind when you're writing your proposal. You see that one of the major things about a successful proposal is that the proposal is clear and it's understandable. So making your science understandable is a fundamental aspect of your proposal. You have to make it as simple as possible for the panel to understand not only your proposal, but your science in general. You have to remember that the panels at the OPC are very broad topical panels, right? We receive proposals for basically everything you can do with a telescope, so all branches of astronomy. So it's very likely that in the panel that is discussing your proposal, there will be no one that is really an expert on your topic specifically. Okay, so you have to keep this in mind when you explain your science case. One important thing also is to get to the point immediately. You want the reviewer to be reading your proposal with a positive eye. So you want them to be excited about your idea as quickly as possible. If it takes half a page to be excited about your idea, the reviewer might be tired already or bored. So this is not what you want to happen. You also need to be explicit about what are your immediate goals, what exactly you're going to do with the data. You cannot assume that the panelists will work out what you mean by reading between the lines. You really have to be explicit about what you do. And if a referee doesn't understand what you say, then you have lost. There will be no possibility for them to check the literature to understand your science. And there will be many very well written and clear proposals. So if they don't understand what you want to do and why you want to do this, your proposal will not get the time. So what are the other aspects in a successful proposal? Well, you have you need to have a good idea, that's for sure. And you have to explain this idea very clearly. You have to explain what is the main question that you want to answer and what you're going to learn by answering this question. But you also need to convince your peers, which are the reviewers, that the idea is good, that answering this question is important in the broad picture of astronomy and should be pursued. You need also to justify very well your request for telescope resources. If you need an 8-meter telescope in contrast to a 4-meter class telescope, then you need to explain why. The time you need, of course, you need to explain very well why you need that amount of time and why you need that instrument is not another instrument that, for example, might have less pressure. And the observing conditions, also, you need to justify why. And here there's an important point because, of course, we astronomers, we want that our data be taken in the best conditions possible. We want photometric transparency. We want the best thing that Paranal has to offer. But do you really need it for your science? Because the most stringent the constraints that you put for the observing conditions, of course, this diminishes the probability that your observations will be carried out in service mode. So you have to be very careful here. And in fact, what you specify in the proposal are the minimum conditions that are necessary to achieve your science, are the worst condition possible that you can still work with. So the worst conditions that you still achieve your signal to noise, you still achieve the background subtraction you need. So this is what you need to put in your proposal. So basically, it's very likely that the observing conditions during your observations will be better than that, but you have to specify what's the minimum that you can work with. And you also have to demonstrate that what you're proposing is feasible, not only in terms of the technical feasibility that you can achieve the right signal to noise you are looking for, but also that in terms of the argumentation and the science, that what you're proposing is feasible. You have to be aware, of course, that you are not the only applicant. Of course, as you may know, the reviewers have to read many proposals, typically from 60 to 80 each. So you are competing with a large fraction of the astronomical community. So you have to really put an effort in your proposal. So again, I describe here that you need to make your science understandable, and there are some aspects of this that is very clear. So, for example, you need to avoid jargon. There are expressions in your field that may not be used in other fields, so people might not understand. And as I said, if they don't understand your proposal, you have lost. You have to avoid acronyms. Of course, some may be understandable by everyone, but some may need an explanation. So if you need acronyms or special terms, you need to explain them at the beginning of the proposal so they are understandable later. And you have to avoid complicated language. Of course, you use simple English, and most of us are native speakers. So it can be an added effort to write it in correct and proper English. And it's a good idea. It's always very good to have either senior colleagues or native speakers to read your proposal before you submit it. So this aspect of making your proposal as clear as possible is so important that there has its own bullet point in the call for proposal. So I'm just going to read this highlighted part here from the call. Proposers should make sure that the context of their project and its relevance for general astrophysics, so the big picture, as well as any other recent related results, are emphasized in a way that can be understood by the peers and regardless of their expertise. Okay, so of course, if you're submitting a proposal for galaxies, this is going to go to the galaxy panel, but there are so many different topics that you can study within galaxies that your subfield, your specific topic, might not be necessarily represented in the panel. So you have to keep this in mind and make sure you write a proposal that other people who work with galaxies can understand your proposal, even if they don't work specifically on your topic. Let's go a little bit on other aspects of the proposal. So the abstract, of course, is extremely important. This is the one paragraph that is guaranteed that is going to be read by everyone in your panel. So you have to be able to summarize all the excitement about your science case in that one paragraph. So it's a good practice to revisit your abstract several times during the writing, because you might start your proposal writing the abstract, or in the beginning of the proposal writing you write the abstract, but it's going to be clear to you that after working on a proposal that the abstract can be improved, and you should do it, because it is really very important aspect of the proposal. And the abstract, of course, has to contain the punchline, has to contain what exactly you want to do and why it is important. Another aspect that is very important is to have a consistent proposal. So you have to make sure that you selected the best instrument for your observations. This is one thing that reviewers will look at, and if they are not convinced that you are using the best instrument, they will not rank your proposal high. They will come back to you and say, why don't you consider that other instrument? You have to make sure that the exposure times and the target sample selection that you have match your science case. And we see sometimes proposals in which they request some exposure time in one part of the proposal, say 20 hours, and in another part of the proposal they request 16 hours. And this looks bad, of course. There's a good chance that a reviewer will identify these inconsistencies and will be picky about it, because if it's not clear exactly what you need and what you want. So this is something you have to be careful about. Of course, the exposure times also have to make sense in relation to your target properties, and also in relation to the science case. And of course, it's very important to use the exposure time calculators to derive proper exposure times. You have to explain how you use the ETCs and how you derive the exposure time. So there will be a talk about this later on today. And figures and tables are also something that is important to keep in mind, because sometimes we see proposals where the figures are there just as decoration, and they are not referenced to in the proposal. So the figures should be there really to support the text and support your case, and not just be a decoration in the proposal. So this is something that you have to be to pay attention. And of course, you know that a picture speaks 1,000 words, so figures are important, and you have to make sure that they are supporting your proposal and helping your case. You have to specify not only exposure time, but you have to specify actually the whole time that it takes to make your observations, right? The exposure times is just part of the time that it's needed, because you have overheads for telescope pointing, instrument setup, etc. So this is what you need to specify in the proposal, not the exposure times only. We need to know the whole time that it takes to run your program. So there are specific tables that are linked from the call, where you can see the exposure time, the overheads for all kinds of observations. But the best way to quantify your overheads is to use the P2 tool, and you prepare some test observing blocks in which you can immediately see exactly what the overheads that your observations imply. And exposure times, as I said, you have to use the ETCs, which are going to be talked by Hibofan later on. So now I'm going to start giving you some more helpful tips, some do's and don'ts of writing a proposal. And let me start by saying that you need to take the instructions seriously. You should not think that the instructions that are in the call for proposals are just things that you can dismiss. Any proposal that does not provide all the information that is requested, of course, damages itself. So you have to really read the relevant parts of the call for proposals. So let me start with the don'ts. This is something that we take from real cases. So you should not include targets that are for a different period. So we have now the call for period 108, which goes from March to October. So of course you should not submit a proposal for targets that are visible in November, or that start to being visible in the other half of the year. We see this happening, and of course this means that the oversubscription rate at the end of the periods it can be very large. So if your program really requires or is best suited for the next period, don't submit it now. One problem we see also often is that people want to put as many figures as they can, and then they make figures that are really too small. Of course, the reviewers receive the PDF and they can zoom in, but they don't want to go to this extra trouble. They want to have a figure that they can look at it and understand immediately. Don't have to have an effort to really read everything that is in the figure. So you have to be careful with it. Remember that they are reading a lot of proposals. And also try not to submit your proposal at the last minute. And as Nando said, some people try to submit after the deadline even, but we are very strict on this, and people cannot do this. And of course, this by doing it at the last minute, this means that the probability that you make a mistake is larger, and we see this happening often. But we are astronomers, right? And I don't know why we really say to people not to wait for the last minute, because every period we see this curve here, which has been called the procrastination graph. So basically, this is the number of submitted proposals on the y-axis as a function of time from the deadline. So basically, the call is released at minus 28 days before the submission deadline. You see the number of proposals that we receive as a function of time. Of course, most of the proposals are submitted in the last day and even in the last few hours. And it's incredible to see this green curve, which is the cumulative curve, is almost identical every period. So everybody submits at the last minute. I always recommend that you at least try to submit in the day before, because you avoid these rushes and mistakes that you can make at the end. Don't submit more proposals that you can deal with. This is common sense. Don't include QIs in the proposers list, in the investigators list, without explicit agreement. This is now with the new P1 system, where they will receive an email once they are added to the proposal. So this is taken care of, but in the past we had to be concerned about this. And of course, don't plagiarize proposals that you had access to. What you should do, you should read and understand the relevant parts of the call for proposals. You don't have to read everything, although if it's the first time you submit a proposal, I really recommend you do. There is a section of important recent changes that you can look. There are also a section on forcing changes for the next periods. And you can easily search the PDF of the call for proposal. So for your instrument, for example, and you can read all the remarks corresponding to your instrument. There are also many links on the technical aspects from the call for proposals that you can access. Keep in mind that you're applying for time in one of the most demanded scientific facilities of the planet, so there's a lot of competition. You should also check the GTO target protection list for your instrument. So basically, if you are applying for Muse time, and there's at the moment a Muse GTO going on, so you have to make sure that you're not submitting proposals for observations that the GTO team are going to make. You have to be specific about what is the expected outcome of the project. So what is the quantitative information about the targets that you want to obtain? Which physical processes will this information constrain, how? And for example, will the data be compared to theoretical models? Do these models already exist? If not, how they will be developed? Can your data help developing these models? In case of a resubmission of an unsuccessful proposal, you of course need to take into account the feedback that you received from the OPC previously, but that doesn't mean that addressing these comments guarantees that your proposal will be accepted. Of course, you are only improving your proposal, but every cycle there are new proposals coming in, and there are also different reviewers. So the process is basically and restarted anew. You have to carefully justify the required parameters for your observations. As I said, the telescope and the instrument, why you need that signal to noise ratio for your science, why you need that spatial resolution, that spectral resolution. And one thing that's very important is the size of the sample that you want to observe, of course, because this is related to the telescope time you need. So reviewers are very concerned about the size of the sample. So you have to justify why you need 100 galaxies to attain the science answer that you want to obtain instead of 60 galaxies, for example. And the target selection criteria is also very, very important to spell out. And you have to spell out what you mean by statistical significant sample also. You have to really mathematically quantify these terms. Don't let the reviewers try to guess what you mean by this, because they want you really to explain clearly what you mean. You should fill as accurately and completely as possible all the required fields of the proposal form. We will have a talk later on today about the P1 submission proposal form, basically, and you have to try and fill these fields as completely as possible, and check that your proposal is compliant to be submitted also as early as possible. Now with the new P1 system, at the top of the proposal, you will see in red the things that you still have to do to be able to see the submit button. So if you don't do this, you cannot submit the proposal. So you can, if you are in doubt, you can use some fake parts of the proposal to make sure that you know how to fill these forms, and then you can later on update the numbers with the right numbers, just to be sure that you can submit at the end. And this is, of course, if you're doing this 1 hour before the proposal submission deadline, you are bound to make mistakes, and so this is not what you want to do. Once the time allocation process is completed, you're going to receive an email from OPPO that you have to go to the user portal, and there you will see what we call the web letters, where you see the feedback from the OPC, also some other feedback from us at OPPO in terms of scheduling. And you can send queries back to us if you think the feedback that you received was not enough, or if you think that an error was made in any part of these processes. But note that the science evaluations are not subject to revision. This is the science evaluation that was done by the OPC at that moment, and this cannot be changed. And this is, of course, not an opportunity to rewrite a proposal and send it back to us. I'm trying to finish fast because of the time, but bear with me, just a few more slides. One thing is important about resubmission, because of course more than 35% of the proposals are resubmissions. We all have had proposals that are rejected, and this is part of the process as well. You improve proposals and make them better, and then eventually you might get the time. So as I said, you really need to address comments from the previous submission, and you have to be clear about what you change and how the proposal was improved by considering the previous OPC feedback. We have the special remarks field where you can summarize this, but of course the science case should also reflect this. And you have to think about, why did the panel not understand your proposal? It's common that we receive feedback from the users that they think that the reviewers did not understand your proposal. So you have to try and understand why, and this is most likely not only their fault, and very likely it's your fault actually, because you didn't explain well. So you have to try and be more explicit, more direct, and really clear about your science case. If you are submitting a proposal, there is a continuation of a program that is ongoing or that has started in a previous period, you have to address why you need to submit this continuation. What are the new goals? Why you need a bigger sample, for example, and what has changed since the last time you submitted the last proposal. Of course, reviewers want to see what you have done with the data already, if there were papers published, for example. So in summary, what makes a proposal successful is exciting science. And sometimes you see proposals that are actually not very well written, but they have a science case that is so exciting that it goes through, because it's really very clear that you need to do this. So you can also have a neat idea, an unusual method, or a new idea, a new approach to obtain some kind of answer or an experiment. So this is also helpful. If you find a different way to answer a question by using a different approach, different observations. Clear language, as I said many times. You have to make sure you're presenting an exciting story that is interesting for the readers, right? And you have to try, the space is limited, but you have to think about what are the questions that someone who is not really working on your topic will ask themselves while they are reading your proposal. And you have to try and cover all these questions in the proposal already, because if they have too many open questions, the reviewers are likely not to really fully understand your proposal and not rank it high. And of course, as I said, you have to go to the point as quickly as possible. So you have also the final aspect, you have to have a consistent story. The proposal has to be complete and provide all the information that is requested, and the quantitative arguments about the amount of time that you request and all the other constraints have to be consistent throughout the proposal. So good luck with your proposals. It's time to start writing, and we will finish here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. So I think we can try and answer a couple of questions related to this presentation, and then we move to the coffee break. We are a little bit flexible with time, so let's maybe just start with a couple of questions. So the first, we got a few questions in the chat. I think the first one could be to Richard, to Dimitri. That's a question from Richard, who is asking regarding the right ascension coverage. If you have a program that spans multiple, for example, 2 periods, and where some targets are mostly observable during only one of the 2 periods, but not exclusively, what is the best way to proceed?
Well, I mean, you could, there is a field where you can specify future observations, right? So you could submit a proposal. So say that you have targets between period 108 and period 109, and so you could submit the proposal now and explain that you're submitting to part of the sample at this moment, and that you will need the rest of the sample later on, and you can add this the amount of time you will need in period 109 in this section about the future observations. Of course, it depends on what kind of program you want. If it's a monitoring program, you can submit proposals already for the 2 periods. But if it's not a monitoring program or a large program where you can also submit for 2 periods, I think the best way is to explain that you will need further observations, but don't add all the targets at that point. Just explain how the target division is made between the 2 periods, and explain how much time you're going to need in the next call.
Thank you, Dimitri. So then there are a few questions on the anonymous process. So I don't know if Nando wants to take them. So 2 are quite connected. They are regarding the team membership, background expertise sections. So Stuart is asking what happens once they are revealed to the OPC, if the grade of the proposal can be changed. And related to that, Laura is asking if whether these are evaluated or part of the evaluation process or not, these sections.
So these sections are not seen by the reviewers for obvious reasons, because they both plainly and reveal the team identity. So those are only there in order to ensure the possibility that if the reviewers express perplexities, for instance, about the team capabilities to deal with the data they are asking for, which happens especially when the request is large, they can only take note of this during the review. They say, take a note and make an example. We are not convinced this team, based on what they write, is going to be able to cope with the data. This case is then signaled to us after the review is completed. And at that point, we disclose the content, all the non-anonymous content, which means publication list, background and expertise, team composition, and previous usage of the facilities. There will be a session for this. We expect this to be a very small number of cases based on the HST experience. In that case, they get to see this for this specific proposal, and then they are gonna write a recommendation. The recommendation could be, which is the case typically, yeah, okay, we have verified this team has the expertise they claim to have in the proposal, and therefore no action is required. Or they may make a recommendation. The science case is absolutely good, is very good, so the grade, and they are not allowed to change the rank and the grade. However, we express our concerns to the Director General that this team is not going to be able to cope with the data. It is then the Director General that will take a final decision. So the short answer is these sections will not be used in the evaluation, grade and ranking of the proposal, will only be used in cases which are reckoned to be critical. We expect those to be a very small minority.
Thank you, Nando. So let's continue with a question from Piercarlo Bonifacio. In case of resubmission, if I make clear what has changed, does it not violate the anonymity? Also for continuation programs, how not to violate anonymity?
Well, this is one of the cases which is probably impossible to make anonymous at 100% level. However, this requires some action on the reviewers, because if you say this is a continuation program, but you don't say who the PI was, in order for them to understand who the PI was, well, this will take a number of actions. In the case your program was rejected, well, they cannot verify whether they cannot find it in the list of accepted proposals, and all other proposals are kept unknown. If they have memories of the previous proposal, because they remember that, they don't know who the PI was because they never get to see it unless they had explicitly asked for that specific proposal to see the composition. Therefore, if you don't use explicit references to your program, there are examples on the guidelines. This is reckoned as one of those ambiguous cases in which you put yourself in a safe situation by not specifying explicitly. Because if you say, as we have requested in the previous semester, and then you put also the program ID, and then, you know, or you say explicitly declare your name, then that is not ambiguous anymore. So again, this goes to the pool of cases in which there is some impossibility to make it 100% bulletproof.
So last one before the break. So it's a follow-up from Richard. So maybe Dimitri wants to pick it. So does favorable evaluation in P108 would help with P109 evaluation if future observations were previously specified?
Well, we have to think that the P109 OPC is not going to be exactly the same as the P108 OPC. So saying that you had, I'm not sure if I understood fully the question, but saying that you have got favorable comments from the OPC in P108 in a P109 proposal. So maybe Richard is raising his hand and maybe he wants to speak. Or
so let me allow him to unmute. Richard, go ahead, please.
Hi, thanks very much. So this is basically about the question I asked earlier about how to structure a program that would carry over multiple periods. And as you suggested, that it would be possible to specify time that would be needed in a following period. If I then have to resubmit a new proposal in the following period, then of course I go through the evaluation process again. And how can I, you know, if I specify in the first proposal that I need all of the observations and all the sample in order to conduct the study, how can I carry that over into the next proposal phase is basically the question, while perhaps also maintaining anonymity.
Yes, well, the proposal as well asks you how much time was awarded to this proposal, the same science case in the past. And therefore, there you say, well, I have received so many hours, and this still does not disclose your identity. So that is the simple way. And then in the previous usage of the facility, which is an anonymous section, you can spell this out in, you know, very, very clearly. So they would see from the proposal that you already got time. They don't know who this is. And okay, they may say, yeah, but we would like to make sure this is true. And therefore, after having done the review, So they review favorably your case because the science is good, if they deem it so, and then at the end they ask to see whether what you're saying is true. So they go to that section and they see, okay, this is the program ID, and then they will ask us, is this true that they got the data? And we say, yes, it is true. Now I'm making a big fuss out of this. This will never happen. I don't think they will question that. It's going to be a very rare occurrence in which they will want to verify whether the statement that you made that you already got time in that specific box is true or not.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you very much. Let's thank Nando, Dimitri, and Marina for the talks.